Welcome to So Very Wrong About Games. Today all we have is an overview and a review. If you like what you see, wait to the end. We have some links to our podcast and other stuff. Here we go. So this will not be a rules explanation. This is just going to be a very brief summary on how the game is played. It is played differently through different player counts, but essentially the actions are the same and how the mechanics work together are the same. And we're going to be using this variant here that just makes the game better, so check it out. We'll put a link in the description below where you can find this variant. It's just commonly used in this particular game. So on your turn, you're pretty well just playing out what you've already planned for in a previous turn, because when it is your actual turn, you're sort of locked into what you can do, because you already have your certain cubes, and you've already decided how far you're going to be able to move. So you've sort of already gauged what you have. So you're going to be following out on those plans and sort of getting ready for the next turn. So when it is your turn, you're playing cubes out on the board. No one is in charge of these particular colors. It's all down to everyone has their own little player board here, and whoever has the most cubes in a certain color is controlling that color. So on my turn, I could put more cubes into pink to sort of solidify my control in pink. I could put more in blue to try to take that over, or no one has any cubes in green, so I could take that over. But I took the number 1 initiative, so I know the floating death head, when I'm done placing cubes, is going to move 1 space. So I know I have control of pink for this turn. I could sort of look ahead and see how far down pink's going to hit again, so, prepare for that, or, stuff like that. The other place you can put cubes is out on these territories, and you only want to do that if you know you're going to be in control of those colors, because otherwise you're just making those colors mean more on those territories to whoever does have control. So you don't want to be putting color cubes out there unless you know you're going to keep control of those areas. So after I placed my 3 to 4 cubes, depending on how many players, it's now time to move Carol, or the floating death head. So like I said, in this case, I took the 1 initiative. He's going to move 1 space. You sort of assess the space. There could be more cubes on there. There could be these castles. You just decide, you figure out who has control of it now. Everything is worth 1. So in this particular case, I control pink. So I am in control. I simply take one of my castles and put it on that territory. Once it comes around again, I now have just a total of 1 because of my castles, and then plus or minus any cubes that I can control. So this is why you want to get your castles out. Not only do they help you control these territories, but it's whoever gets all of their castles out, depending on the player count. Whoever gets them all out first wins the game. There's no score or points or anything like that. Get your castles out first before anyone else does, and you win. The other interesting part about the game is if you ever control 2 territories that are beside each other, they immediately merge together. And you want to do that because obviously now that I control them both and they've merged together, I now have 2 castles on there. And so when it gets reassessed again, I'll have a total of 2 there, plus or minus any cubes. And that is a good way to sort of take control back of the game, or if someone's far ahead, you can sort of look ahead to where they've got, 2 or more castles. And if you take that away from them, then they're going to lose those castles and they're going to set them back and, jettison you further ahead. And then once you've assessed that, once the floating death head moved and you assess the territory and you change control, then you're going to use the variant that I talked about. So instead of rolling random dice and getting the cubes, you're going to pick from these, pools. Usually we have a number of cubes, with 1 more than the number of players. And so you see roughly where you think the death head's going to go, and then you're going to take those cubes into your little stock, and now you're sort of ready for the next turn. And then once everyone's taken their turn, you're going to choose initiative again. So I've already used the 1, so that's turned down, and because I went first, I get to choose first again. I'm going to choose the 4. I put that in the middle. No one else can choose 4. And that's a very interesting mechanic, is once you've picked your initiative, no one else can choose that number, and you go through all the numbers, and it's a really interesting way you could lock down how far that can move, or when you're going to act, and trying to see how far ahead it's going to go and pre-plan for that, where you're going to attack and what colors you're going to control once it's around there. And that's pretty well how the game works.
Believe it or not, there was an era when Euros weren't all just spreadsheets, and where wooden cubes wouldn't represent, 1/5 of your supply of timber or something, but actually represented, well, people fighting. Euros used to be confrontational. Euros used to be weird. And Leo Colavini is definitely an expert at such things.
This is the Chucky Mags. This is definitely confrontational. It starts off right at the beginning, like right when you're picking your initiative number.
Yes.
You're already slapping your opponents in the face. That is the best part about this game, because when you pick your initiative, then no one else can pick that, and it just dictates the whole tempo for the rest of that round. I just love it.
Some of the biggest bugbears in a lot of Euros tend to be things like turn order and tiebreakers. And the initiative system is really clever in Carolus Magnus, and it really obviates all of those problems. And right away, when Big Carol starts moving around the board, you're already fighting with people. And a lot of it is just sniping. A lot of it is just, okay, well, there's this one green here, I'll take the one green, and okay, I'll take this one little thing, and it's really situational. But as the territories merge, suddenly the stakes start skyrocketing, and things become much more important.
Yeah, I love that about the merging, because it allows you to like protect your area. So that's why you're really looking. It's just, this is a game where you 100% have to look ahead, because if you haven't already planned out your next turn, then it's hard to react, because you're sort of locked in when it's your turn. You only have certain cubes. You can only move a certain distance. So if you haven't already programmed all this out, then you're toast.
Which is to a certain extent why we play with a very important variant. And the rules is written in the base game, you get a random assortment of cubes to replenish your supply. Which, given that you're going to be replenishing either 3 out of 7 or 4 out of 9 based on player count, more on that later, it can be really, really unfortunate to just not get the colors you need. There's a very common variant on Board Game Geek, we'll put the link up in the video description, where you draft piles of cubes, which further doubles down on the importance of turn order and makes the game more deterministic, which is why I vastly prefer it.
Yeah, just like I said, that's the only random part about the game. Otherwise, it's a no-luck Euro, right? It's what you're pulling out of the bag is going to make your draft. But that, if you had to roll, that would ruin the game for me, because this, you get to see what's out there, you get to draft, like to protect, like I already talked about. You get to protect what pylons you're in charge of, because whoever has the most here, so you can deny that person. It's like, oh, it's the only yellow here, you take that, so no one else can get the yellow, and then you know for that whole round that your yellow is safe, and you can do all sorts of interesting things with that knowledge.
It feels very, very different at different player counts. With 2 and 4 are probably my favorite versions. With 4 you play in partnerships, which is very interesting because you don't combine control of the different colors. You share the colors on the board, but you don't share anything with respect to control of them. With 3, it works fine and it's okay, but you can end up in a situation where A and B are involved in a pissing match, for example, over control of red, and then C just runs away with the game. Let us call C Walker, who then controls all the other colors very easily. And this doesn't happen all the time, it's a possible consequence. One of the things that you can usually identify with a Leo Colavini design is that it's going to feel very, very different, especially from the contemporary Euro design mold. He's probably best known for Clans in Cartagena, but the games of Leo Colavini that I definitely like the most are Carolus Magnus and The Bridges of Shangri-La, both of which are extremely bizarre confrontational Euros with very, very simple rule sets. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's good to go back to those kinds of things. If you're a jaded Euro gamer, if you're a jaded gamer in general, if you hate Euro games, if the only Euro games you play are Roll and Rights and Vital Lacerdas, these are the kind of games that were a little more common a generation or two ago, but definitely a Colavini design tends to be somewhat iconoclastic. This is also the guy who did Incognito, and which kind of sort of reinvigorated the hidden movement deduction genre. And his recent output hasn't really been to my taste, but for a classic palette cleanser, I think you could do a whole lot worse than Carolus Magnus. Its staying power is not what I would call considerable, but it's not really a novelty or flash in the pan either. It's just, as somebody who plays a lot of different games and can tend to identify the same old trends. You know, you may love Daniele Tascini and David Turkse or whatever, but you played one of their games and you can kind of know what to expect. And if you're knee-deep in the current design idiom, I would recommend that you take a look at some of the past classics, some of the forgotten games like Carolus Magnus.
Like Hansa Teutonica, like Tigers and Euphrates, these old Euros that you can't turtle up, you can't just do your own thing and not worry about what other people. It's very confrontational, very, I don't want to say take that, but just because it's deterministic, but it's just very vicious. I love it.
There's talk of a reprint coming. We'll see if that happens, but there should be copies available in the secondary market if you're so inclined. But honestly, whether it's Big Carol, or whether it's some of the other games of the era. Remember, wooden cubes didn't just used to be resource trackers. They used to represent other things. And I'm glad every once in a while, not an everyday kind of thing. Carolus Magnus, as I say, it doesn't necessarily have the legs of some of the other classics. I would definitely put it several ranks below things like Hansa Teutonic or Tag Machine Euphrates. But in terms of returning to a different design aesthetic, to a set of different design priorities, I think it's a good example of what can be accomplished. And this sort of interaction between board presence and board control is evocative of some of your better stock games like Imperial or even like the 18XX games, but nonetheless in a very minimalistic Euro package.
Yeah, and I just hope if they do re-release it, it's like a slightly different skin. So like there's not these like floating islands, so it's sort of like a amoeba sort of.
I like the theme. I like the sort of merging of territories kind of thing. I love these, like, and I don't know why, but I love putting these tiles together in novel ways. It's like, this is my territory. Behold. It's like gerrymandering in the United States. You can make these absurd shapes.
Yeah, and to finish it off, I really just like the fact that when you think someone's ahead, you can just sort of knock them back a bit. You like take one of their territories, they lose, you gain, and it sort of like gives you that chance to get back into it. It's just all around. Play this anytime. I think it's one of these games, if you played it multiple times in a row or over and over, it would sort of dull a bit, but pulling it out every once in a while really gets you back to that old school viciousness. And that is Chucky Mags.